I'm Sarah Chen, 24, and I never thought my father would tell me I was too stupid for higher education. Growing up, he was my hero, teaching me math at the kitchen table, celebrating my science fair victories, beaming with pride at my honor roll ceremonies. Yet senior year of high school, Dad looked me in the eyes and said, "College is wasted on you." All because I chose a different path than he'd mapped out for my life. Despite his crushing words, I kept pushing forward. Then graduation day arrived, revealing a truth that would forever change how he saw his daughter's potential. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The suburbs of Riverside, California, painted the backdrop of my childhood, a place where the desert sun seemed to nurture not just the palm trees lining our streets, but also my earliest dreams of academic achievement. Our ranch-style house in the Mesa Verde neighborhood wasn't elaborate, but it represented everything my immigrant parents had worked to build in America. My father, James Chen, had arrived from Taiwan in 1985 with nothing but an engineering degree and determination to create opportunities for his future family. He worked his way up from junior technician to senior project manager at an aerospace manufacturing company, his precise handwriting filling notebooks with calculations and his desk perpetually cluttered with technical manuals. My mother, Linda, taught ESL classes at the community center while managing our household with the efficiency of a military operation, her days structured around student schedules and family needs. Academic excellence wasn't just encouraged in our home, it was expected as naturally as breathing. Report cards were examined with the thoroughness of financial audits. Every assignment received parental review before submission. Summer breaks meant educational camps and advanced reading programs rather than lazy afternoons by pools. This intensity never felt oppressive during my elementary years because success came easily, almost effortlessly. Mathematics clicked in ways that amazed even my teachers. While classmates struggled with multiplication tables, I was solving complex word problems for fun. Science experiments fascinated me beyond the required curriculum. I'd spend weekends conducting additional research, creating detailed reports about topics that captured my imagination. English and social studies required more effort, but even there, my grades consistently placed me at the top of every class. Dad's pride in my achievements was unmistakable and infectious. He attended every parent-teacher conference, science fair, and academic awards ceremony. When I won the county math competition in 5th grade, he took the day off work to drive me to the ceremony, stopping afterward at my favorite restaurant to celebrate. The trophy held a place of honor on our mantel, and Dad would point it out to visitors with obvious satisfaction. Those elementary school years established patterns that would define our relationship for nearly a decade. Academic success equaled paternal approval. High grades meant animated dinner conversations where Dad shared stories about his own engineering work, treating me like an intellectual peer despite the age gap. Poor performance, even a single B+ on a quiz, resulted in serious discussions about focus and dedication. These consequences weren't harsh, but they established clear connections between my scholastic achievements and family harmony. Middle school introduced new complexities to this dynamic. The coursework became more challenging, requiring genuine effort rather than natural ability alone. For the first time, I encountered subjects that didn't immediately make sense. Pre-algebra concepts took multiple attempts to master. History required memorization techniques I'd never needed before. My first semester grades dropped to a 3.7 GPA, still excellent by objective standards, but representing a significant decline from previous perfect scores. Dad's reaction to this perceived academic slide revealed the intensity of his educational expectations. He instituted daily study sessions at the kitchen table, reviewing my homework with the same attention he applied to aerospace quality control procedures. Weekends became structured around academic improvement rather than social activities. Television. Time was eliminated during the school week. My bedroom was reorganized to create a distraction-free study environment, complete with proper lighting and reference materials. These measures weren't presented as punishment, but as necessary adjustments to maintain the academic trajectory Dad envisioned for my future. He spoke frequently about the importance of education in achieving success in America, drawing from his own immigrant experience to emphasize how knowledge represented the pathway to opportunities. His stories about colleagues who had advanced through technical expertise rather than family connections reinforced his belief that academic achievement was the most reliable foundation for professional success. The pressure intensified when my younger brother Kevin entered elementary school and immediately demonstrated the same natural academic ability I had shown at his age. Dad began comparing our performances explicitly, using Kevin's effortless A's to highlight areas where my own grades had become more variable. These comparisons weren't meant cruelly, but they established a competitive dynamic that would influence our sibling relationship for years. During 7th grade, I discovered the debate team almost by accident. A scheduling conflict forced me into an elective I hadn't chosen, and the teacher recognized something in my argumentative style that suggested potential for competitive speaking. The activity combined research skills, logical reasoning, and public presentation in ways that challenged me differently than traditional coursework. For the first time since elementary school, I found myself genuinely excited about an academic pursuit. Dad's initial response to debate was lukewarm. He viewed it as potentially useful for developing communication skills, but worried it might distract from core subjects like mathematics and science. His engineering background made him skeptical of activities that seemed more focused on persuasion than objective analysis. When I explained how debate required extensive research and logical argumentation, his interest increased slightly, though he remained concerned about time management. My debate performances that year exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. I won 3 tournaments and qualified for regional competition, achievements that required studying complex policy issues and developing sophisticated analytical frameworks. The research process was more intensive than anything I'd encountered in regular classes, involving primary source analysis and statistical evaluation that would have challenged high school students. These successes began shifting Dad's perspective on debate participation. He attended tournaments when work schedules permitted, observing competitions with the same analytical attention he applied to technical problems. After watching me defeat opponents from larger, more prestigious schools, he acknowledged that debate might actually complement rather than compete with traditional academic subjects. His pride in these achievements was evident, though he continued emphasizing the importance of maintaining high grades in core classes. 8th grade brought new challenges as I balanced increasingly demanding regular coursework with intensive debate preparation. The workload was substantial, often requiring late nights and weekend study sessions. My grades fluctuated more than in previous years, occasionally dropping to B+ levels in subjects that conflicted with tournament schedules. These academic variations created tension at home, as Dad struggled to reconcile his approval of debate success with concern about declining performance in traditional subjects. The situation reached a crisis point during 2nd semester when my earth science grade dropped to a B due to missed classes for debate tournaments. Dad called a family meeting to discuss priorities, presenting detailed arguments about the importance of maintaining consistent academic performance across all subjects. He suggested I might need to choose between debate and other activities to ensure adequate focus on core coursework. This conversation represented the first major conflict between my emerging interests and Dad's educational expectations. I argued passionately for the debate's academic value, citing research skills, critical thinking development, and college application benefits. Dad acknowledged these points but remained concerned about grade consistency and time management. The compromise we reached allowed continued debate participation contingent on maintaining a 3.8 GPA in all other subjects. High school arrived with elevated expectations and intensified pressure. Dad had researched the academic requirements for top-tier universities, creating detailed plans for my coursework selection, extracurricular activities, and standardized test preparation. His engineering background made him approach my education like a complex project requiring careful planning and precise execution. Every decision was evaluated based on its potential impact on college admissions prospects. Freshman year began smoothly as I enrolled in honors courses while continuing debate team participation. The increased academic rigor was manageable, and my grades remained consistently high. Dad's detailed involvement in my educational planning created structure that initially seemed helpful rather than constraining. He attended school meetings with counselors, researched advanced placement options, and established study schedules that maximized learning efficiency. However, the intensity of his involvement gradually revealed underlying assumptions about my future that I hadn't fully recognized. Dad's planning assumed I would pursue engineering or another technical field, following his own career path. Course selections emphasized mathematics and science, with humanities treated as necessary but secondary subjects. When I expressed interest in additional English or history courses, he questioned their practical value and worried about time diverted from more important technical preparation. These conversations introduced subtle but growing tension between my developing interests and his expectations. Debate had sparked genuine fascination with policy analysis, legal reasoning, and public communication. I found myself reading political science texts for pleasure and following current events with growing sophistication. When I mentioned potential interest in pre-law studies, Dad's reaction was politely dismissive. He suggested such interests were hobbies rather than serious career considerations. Sophomore year intensified these conflicts as my academic interests continued diverging from his predetermined path. Advanced placement courses in literature and government captured my attention in ways that honors chemistry and physics did not. My grades remained high across all subjects, but the enthusiasm gap was becoming obvious to both of us. Literature essays excited me more than laboratory reports. Government case studies engaged me more deeply than mathematical proofs. Dad noticed these preference patterns and attempted to redirect my focus through structured interventions. He arranged informational interviews with female engineers from his company, hoping to inspire technical career interest. Summer programs were carefully selected to emphasize science and mathematics rather than humanities subjects. My bedroom was stocked with biographies of successful women in STEM fields and college guides highlighting technical degree programs. These efforts weren't unsuccessful. The engineering professionals I met were impressive and inspiring. However, their career descriptions didn't generate the same excitement I felt when researching Supreme Court cases or analyzing policy debates. The disconnect between my natural interests and Dad's career expectations was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, though I hadn't yet found the courage to address it directly. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The debate team continued providing an outlet for my developing intellectual passions. Junior year brought the opportunity to specialize in policy debate, requiring intensive research on complex national issues. The preparation process involved analyzing economic studies, legal precedents, and philosophical arguments with sophistication that challenged me more than any regular coursework. When I qualified for state championships, even Dad had to acknowledge the academic rigor involved. However, his pride in debate achievements remained complicated by concern about their practical implications. He worried that success in speaking competitions might encourage impractical career aspirations rather than supporting technical education goals. When I mentioned that several debate alumni had attended prestigious law schools, his response was carefully neutral rather than enthusiastic. The conversation revealed his fundamental belief that legal careers were less valuable than engineering because they produced arguments rather than tangible products. Junior year academic performance remained strong across all subjects, though My engagement levels varied significantly based on content. Advanced placement calculus felt like an obligation rather than exploration. AP chemistry required considerable effort to maintain A-level performance. Meanwhile, AP English literature and AP government captured my attention so completely that I often exceeded assignment requirements, pursuing additional research on topics that fascinated me. These engagement patterns created new tensions during grade discussions with Dad. He celebrated strong performance in technical subjects while barely acknowledging equally high grades in humanities courses. When I received recognition for outstanding essays or research projects in non-technical areas, his responses were polite but restrained. The implicit message was clear. Success in literature or government was less meaningful than achievement in mathematics or science. The college planning process that began during junior year brought these underlying tensions to the surface. Dad had researched engineering programs at top universities, creating detailed spreadsheets comparing curricula, faculty credentials, and career placement statistics. His assumptions about my college applications were based entirely on technical degree programs, with no consideration of other academic possibilities. When college counseling meetings began addressing potential majors, I finally found courage to express my actual interests rather than simply accepting Dad's assumptions. The conversation took place after a particularly successful debate tournament, where I had defeated teams from schools Dad respected. I explained that debate had revealed genuine passion for legal reasoning and policy analysis that felt more compelling than engineering coursework. Dad's initial response was measured rather than immediately negative. He acknowledged my debate success and recognized the intellectual sophistication required for competition. However, he questioned whether these interests represented serious career possibilities or simply academic hobbies. His concerns were practical, rather than dismissive: job market considerations, earning potential, long-term stability. From his immigrant perspective, technical careers offered more reliable pathways to success than fields requiring subjective evaluation. These discussions continued throughout junior year as college planning intensified. Dad researched pre-law programs with the same thoroughness he applied to engineering research, but his findings reinforced rather than alleviated his concerns. Law school admission statistics, bar exam passage rates, and legal career employment data all suggested risks that seemed unnecessary when engineering opportunities were readily available. His analysis was factually accurate but emotionally devastating because it implied my strongest interests represented poor judgment rather than authentic passion. The summer before senior year became a battleground for my future direction. Dad arranged internships at engineering firms, hoping direct exposure to technical work would rekindle interest I'd never actually demonstrated. I participated enthusiastically, wanting to give his vision fair consideration. The experience was educational and the professionals impressive, but the work didn't generate excitement comparable to what I felt during debate preparation or political science research. Meanwhile, I secretly applied for a summer program in constitutional law at UC Berkeley, using savings from part-time work to cover the application fee. When acceptance arrived, I faced the challenge of requesting permission to attend without revealing I had applied independently. The conversation required careful preparation because it represented the first direct challenge to Dad's educational planning. His reaction to the law program request revealed the depth of his disappointment in my developing interests. He didn't forbid participation, but his questions made clear his view that such activities were indulgent distractions from serious academic preparation. The week-long program was presented as potentially interesting, but ultimately irrelevant to practical career development. His reluctant permission came with conditions about maintaining focus on engineering preparation and not allowing legal studies to interfere with technical coursework. The constitutional law program proved transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, I was surrounded by peers who shared my intellectual passions and adults who took those interests seriously. The professors treated high school students as capable of sophisticated legal reasoning, assigning reading that challenged me more than any high school coursework. Guest speakers included practicing attorneys, judges, and legal scholars who presented law as intellectually rigorous rather than practically secondary. Most significantly, the program demonstrated that my debate skills and policy interests represented genuine academic strengths rather than pleasant hobbies. My performance impressed instructors who encouraged serious consideration of legal education. They treated my questions as insightful and my analysis as sophisticated, creating confidence in abilities that Dad had never explicitly validated. For 1 week, my strongest interests were treated as valuable rather than problematic. Returning home after the program, I faced the challenge of integrating this transformative experience with family expectations that remained unchanged. Dad's questions about the program were polite but perfunctory, lacking the detailed interest he showed in engineering-related activities. When I described the constitutional law cases we'd analyzed, his attention wandered in ways that made clear his view of such topics as academic entertainment rather than serious study. Senior year began with intensified college application pressure. Dad's research had produced detailed lists of engineering programs ranked by prestige and career outcomes. His spreadsheets included application deadlines, required test scores, and admission essay prompts for technical degree programs at 15 universities. The assumption that I would apply exclusively to engineering programs had never been directly discussed, but was embedded in every aspect of his planning. The first major conflict arose when I requested to add political science programs to my application list. Dad's reaction revealed assumptions I hadn't fully recognized about intelligence, gender, and career appropriateness. He suggested that legal interests might reflect insufficient confidence in mathematical abilities rather than authentic intellectual preference. His questions implied that choosing humanities over engineering would represent settling for easier coursework rather than pursuing genuine passion. These conversations were more painful than any previous academic discussions because they questioned not just my choices, but my capabilities. Dad had always celebrated my intelligence, but his response to my major preferences suggested that celebration was conditional on channeling that intelligence toward fields he valued. The implication that political science represented intellectual retreat rather than advancement cut deeply because it dismissed the areas where I felt most capable and engaged. The situation deteriorated when I requested to schedule meetings with the school's pre-law advisor. Dad's reaction was swift and decisive. Such meetings would be premature and potentially misleading about realistic career options. He arranged competing appointments with engineering recruiters and technical career counselors, filling my schedule with alternatives that precluded pre-law exploration. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. Engineering advice was valuable, while legal guidance was frivolous. These scheduling conflicts forced me to choose between respecting Dad's wishes and pursuing my own interests. For the first time in my academic career, I decided to prioritize my goals over his approval. I rescheduled the engineering meetings and secretly met with the pre-law advisor during lunch periods. These conversations confirmed that my academic record and debate experience represented strong preparation for legal education, validating interests that Dad continued treating as impractical fantasies. The pre-law advisor encouraged me to apply to universities with strong political science programs alongside any engineering applications. Her practical advice about maintaining options contrasted sharply with Dad's insistence on exclusive focus. When I mentioned my father's concerns about legal career prospects, she provided current employment data showing strong outcomes for graduates from quality programs. The information contradicted several of Dad's assumptions, but sharing it would require revealing my secret meetings. October brought early application deadlines and forced decisions about college choices. Dad expected me to submit early decision applications to his preferred engineering programs, demonstrating commitment to the path he'd planned. I requested time to consider options more carefully, wanting to include political science programs in my application strategy. His reaction revealed the intensity of his investment in my engineering education. Delay was interpreted as doubt about my abilities, rather than exploration of alternatives. The conversation that occurred that evening represented the most serious conflict in our relationship. Dad presented detailed arguments about engineering career advantages, women's opportunities in technical fields, and the practical benefits of following his guidance. His passion was evident, and his concerns genuine, but his presentation assumed I shared his values and priorities. When I tried to explain my different interests, he interpreted my words as confusion rather than clarity. That night, I made the decision that would define my senior year and beyond. Instead of submitting early decision applications to engineering programs, I would apply to a broader range of schools, including strong liberal arts colleges and universities with excellent political science departments. The choice required deception because Dad expected daily updates on application progress and assumed my essays were focused on engineering interests. The deception proved more difficult than anticipated. Dad reviewed my application materials with the thoroughness he applied to engineering projects, expecting to see evidence of technical passion in my essays. I was forced to write different versions, engineering-focused essays to show him and authentic pieces about my actual interests for submission. The duplicate work was exhausting, but the alternative of direct confrontation seemed impossible given his level of emotional investment. November brought college interviews that intensified the deception. Dad expected to drive me to engineering program interviews while I was scheduled for political science meetings at different schools. I arranged rides with friends and created elaborate explanations for schedule conflicts. The lies felt terrible, but they seemed preferable to the disappointment and arguments that honesty would generate. The interview experiences reinforced my conviction about academic direction. Engineering program interviews felt like performances, where I acted interested in subjects that didn't engage me. Political science interviews felt like conversations where I could discuss topics that genuinely excited me. The contrast was obvious, and the admissions officers seemed to notice the difference in my enthusiasm levels. December brought the first college acceptances and the need for increasingly elaborate deception. Early admission letters from engineering programs arrived with fanfare from Dad, who treated them as validation of his planning. Meanwhile, acceptance letters from liberal arts colleges arrived when he was at work, creating opportunities to celebrate privately while maintaining pretense about my primary interests. The most difficult moment came when I received early admission to Stanford's political science program with a merit scholarship. The achievement represented everything I'd worked toward, but sharing the news would require explaining my secret application process. Instead, I celebrated alone in my bedroom while preparing to present Dad with engineering acceptances that felt like consolation prizes despite their objective prestige. Christmas break provided time to consider the increasingly complex situation I'd created. The deception was becoming unsustainable as enrollment deadlines approached and final decisions became necessary. Dad's excitement about engineering acceptances was genuine and touching, making the eventual revelation more painful to contemplate. However, 4 years of studying subjects that didn't interest me seemed like a betrayal of everything I'd learned about my own capabilities and passions. The breaking point approached as spring semester began, and final college decisions loomed. Dad had created detailed analyses of engineering program advantages, expecting me to choose among technical options he'd researched. His investment in my engineering education was so complete that alternative choices seemed not just disappointing, but incomprehensible to him. January brought the conversation I'd been dreading since October. Dad's expectations for final college selection assumed I would choose among engineering programs, with discussion focused on comparing technical curricula and career prospects. When I requested consideration of other options, his initial response was a patient explanation about why engineering represented the best choice given my abilities and opportunities. The patience disappeared when I revealed the full extent of my alternative interests and secret application process. Dad's reaction combined disappointment, betrayal, and genuine confusion about my motivations. His questions revealed assumptions about my decision-making process that I'd never explicitly challenged, that intelligence naturally led to technical careers, that practical considerations should outweigh personal preferences, that his guidance represented objective wisdom rather than personal bias. The conversation that followed was the most difficult of my life. Dad's hurt was evident as he realized the extent of my deception and the implications of my actual college choices. His practical concerns about legal career prospects were intermingled with personal disappointment about the path he'd planned for my future. When reasoning failed to persuade me toward engineering, his arguments became more emotional and ultimately more devastating. The words that would define our relationship for the next several years emerged from his frustration and disappointment. Looking at my acceptance letters from liberal arts colleges, Dad expressed his final judgment about my choices and, implicitly, about my intelligence and judgment. The phrase that cut deepest was delivered with cold certainty rather than angry heat, making it feel like considered evaluation rather than momentary frustration. "College is wasted on you," he said, examining my Stanford political science acceptance letter like evidence of poor judgment. "You're throwing away real opportunities for fantasy careers that don't even exist." The words landed like physical blows because they came from the person whose opinion had shaped my self-concept throughout my academic development. Dad's approval had been the foundation of my confidence, and his dismissal felt like invalidation of everything I'd achieved. The implication that my strongest interest represented stupidity rather than intelligence challenged the core of my identity as an academic achiever. That moment marked the end of our shared educational journey and the beginning of a more complicated relationship where my choices would need validation from sources beyond parental approval. The path forward would require proving not just academic capability, but the wisdom of following interests that Dad considered impractical. Success would need to be measured by standards other than his expectations, a prospect that was simultaneously liberating and terrifying. The conversation ended with Dad's ultimatum about my college choice, engineering program or withdrawal of support for higher education entirely. The choice was presented as final wisdom rather than emotional manipulation, though the practical implications were the same. I faced the decision that would define not just my academic future, but the nature of our relationship for years to come. Standing in our kitchen, surrounded by acceptance letters and the remnants of our shared educational dreams, I realized that proving Dad wrong would require more than just academic success. It would require demonstrating that intelligence could be expressed through different paths than he'd envisioned, and that his definition of practical success was not the only valid measure of achievement. The challenge ahead was formidable: succeeding academically while rebuilding our relationship, pursuing interests he'd dismissed while proving their value, and ultimately graduating with achievements that would force reconsideration of his assumptions about my capabilities and choices. The journey would test everything I'd learned about resilience, determination, and the courage required to pursue authentic interests, despite disapproval from those whose opinions matter most. The silence that followed Dad's ultimatum stretched across our kitchen like a chasm. His words, "College is wasted on you," hung in the air between us, more final than any door slamming could have been. I stood there holding my Stanford acceptance letter, the merit scholarship details suddenly, feeling like evidence against me rather than achievement to celebrate. Mom appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension she could probably feel from upstairs. Her eyes moved between Dad's rigid posture and my shell-shocked expression, immediately understanding that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. She'd witnessed our college planning discussions with growing concern but had never directly intervened, hoping we'd find compromise through rational discussion. "James," she said quietly, using the tone reserved for his most stubborn engineering moments, "maybe we should all take a step back and talk about this calmly." Dad's response revealed the depth of his disappointment. There's nothing left to discuss, Linda. She's made her choice. 4 years of planning, research, everything we've worked toward, thrown away for some fantasy about becoming a lawyer. The word fantasy stung particularly because it dismissed not just my career interests but the academic achievements that had led to them. I'd maintained a 4.0 GPA while competing nationally in debate, earned recognition from teachers across multiple subjects, and received merit scholarships to prestigious universities. Yet Dad characterized these accomplishments as delusion rather than evidence of capability. It's not a fantasy, I said, finding my voice despite the emotional turmoil. Political science is a legitimate academic field. Law is a real profession. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm pursuing what I'm actually good at instead of pretending to be interested in something I'm not. Dad's laugh held no warmth. Good at? You mean talking and arguing? That's not a career, Sarah. That's what people do when they can't handle real technical challenges. You have mathematical ability, scientific reasoning skills. Why waste them on liberal arts nonsense? The conversation revealed assumptions about intelligence and gender that Dad had never articulated so directly. His worldview categorized academic subjects into hierarchies where technical fields represented serious intellectual work, while humanities subjects were consolation prizes for those unable to handle mathematical rigor. The fact that I'd excelled in advanced calculus and physics didn't matter because choosing liberal arts still represented intellectual retreat in his framework. Mom stepped closer, placing herself physically between us as if proximity might facilitate understanding. Sarah has worked incredibly hard and achieved remarkable things. Can't we at least discuss her options before making final decisions? The options are simple, Dad replied. She can choose engineering and get our full support for college, or she can pursue this legal fantasy on her own. I won't pay for 4 years of expensive education that leads nowhere. The financial ultimatum transformed the conflict from philosophical disagreement to practical crisis. Despite the merit scholarships I'd earned, college still required substantial family contribution beyond my part-time work savings. Dad's withdrawal of support would make attending Stanford or any comparable institution financially impossible without massive student loans. You're using money to control my future, I said, recognizing the dynamic but feeling powerless to counter it effectively. I'm using money responsibly, he corrected. Investing in education that leads to stable careers, not indulging academic fantasies that leave you unemployed after graduation. The evening ended without resolution, but with clear battle lines established. Dad retreated to his home office where he spent hours researching employment statistics for liberal arts graduates, printing articles about law school debt burdens and legal career instability. His preparation suggested this would become an extended campaign rather than momentary disagreement. I sought refuge in my bedroom, surrounded by college acceptance letters that now felt like evidence in a trial rather than opportunities to celebrate. The Stanford materials that had excited me hours earlier now seemed like invitations to family destruction. Could I really choose my academic interests over family harmony? Was Dad right that practical concerns should outweigh personal preferences? Sleep didn't come easily that night. I replayed the conversation obsessively, searching for arguments I might have made more persuasively or compromises that could satisfy both his practical concerns and my authentic interests. The problem felt intractable because we operated from fundamentally different value systems about education's purpose and intelligence's proper application. The next morning brought no softening in Dad's position. Breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence broken only by Mom's attempted normalcy about weekend plans and school activities. Dad avoided eye contact while reviewing technical journals, his body language communicating ongoing disappointment more clearly than words could have. School provided temporary escape from family tension, but the college decision deadline created its own pressure. Friends were excitedly finalizing choices and making enrollment deposits while I remained paralyzed by the conflict between family expectations and personal aspirations. My guidance counselor noticed my distress during our regular check-in meeting. The Rye. Stanford opportunity is extraordinary, Mrs. Rodriguez said after I explained the situation. Full merit scholarship to one of the country's best political science programs. That's recognition of genuine academic achievement, not fantasy or indulgence. Her validation felt crucial because it came from someone whose professional judgment Dad respected. Mrs. Rodriguez had guided hundreds of students through college selection over 2 decades. Her assessment that my interests represented legitimate academic strengths rather than impractical fantasies provided perspective I desperately needed. Have you considered involving your father in conversations with admissions counselors or professors? She suggested. Sometimes parents need to hear from academic authorities that liberal arts fields offer serious intellectual challenges and real career opportunities. The idea seemed promising but risky. Dad's engineering background made him skeptical of educational professionals who promoted non-technical subjects. Previous interactions with school counselors had been polite but dismissive when they discussed humanities coursework. However, the suggestion represented a potentially valuable strategy if implemented carefully. That afternoon, I approached Mom privately about facilitating dialogue between Dad and university representatives. She'd remained carefully neutral during our conflicts, but her educational background made her more sympathetic to academic exploration than Dad's narrow technical focus allowed. Your father's concerns come from love, she said gently. He sees engineering as providing security and opportunity in ways that other fields don't. His immigrant experience shapes how he thinks about career safety. Mom's explanation helped. Contextualize Dad's rigidity without excusing its impact on my educational choices. His insistence on technical careers reflected genuine concern about my future stability rather than arbitrary preference for engineering. However, understanding his motivations didn't resolve the fundamental conflict between his risk assessment and my academic interests. Would you be willing to attend informational meetings about political science programs? I asked. Not to change his mind necessarily, but to get more complete information before final decisions? Mom agreed to suggest such meetings, framing them as due diligence rather than attempts to undermine Dad's position. Her diplomatic approach might succeed where my direct arguments had failed, creating space for dialogue that hadn't been possible. During our emotional confrontations, the strategy worked partially. Dad agreed to attend one informational session about Stanford's political science program, though he characterized it as opportunity to gather evidence about the program's limitations rather than genuine exploration of alternatives. His willingness to attend represented progress, even if his motivation remained skeptical. The Stanford meeting took place on a Saturday morning in February. The admissions representative, Professor Martinez, had extensive experience addressing parental concerns about liberal arts education. She began by acknowledging the practical considerations that worried parents before presenting data about graduate outcomes and career trajectories. Political science prepares students for diverse career paths, Professor Martinez explained, showing employment statistics for recent graduates. Law school is one option, but graduates also enter business, government service, nonprofit management, and academic careers. The analytical and communication skills they develop transfer across multiple professional contexts. Dad listened respectfully, but asked pointed questions about starting salaries, career advancement prospects, and job market competition. His engineering background made him focus on quantifiable metrics rather than qualitative benefits, like intellectual satisfaction or personal fulfillment. The conversation remained civil, but revealed the gap between his practical concerns and academic perspectives on education's broader purposes. The most compelling moment came when Professor Martinez discussed the rigor of political science coursework at Stanford's level. She described research requirements, statistical analysis components, and theoretical frameworks that challenged even highly prepared students. Her presentation countered Dad's assumption that liberal arts represented easier alternatives to technical subjects. Sarah's debate experience and academic record suggest she's well prepared for this level of intellectual challenge, Professor Martinez concluded. The Merit Scholarship recognition indicates faculty confidence in her potential for significant academic achievement. Dad's questions became more thoughtful as the meeting progressed, though his fundamental skepticism remained evident. When Professor Martinez presented law school admission statistics for Stanford political science graduates, his interest increased noticeably. The data showed acceptance rates to top law programs that impressed even his practical sensibilities. The drive home was less tense than I'd expected. Dad didn't express enthusiasm for Stanford's program, but his complete dismissal of liberal arts education had softened into more nuanced concern about practical outcomes. The meeting hadn't converted him to my perspective, but it had introduced complexity to his previously binary thinking about academic choices. The professor made valid points about analytical skill development, he admitted during dinner that evening. Political science might be more rigorous than I initially thought. This represented the first positive statement about my academic interests Dad had made in months. Mom and I exchanged cautious glances, recognizing potential opening for continued dialogue without wanting to pressure him toward premature conclusions. However, the fundamental financial ultimatum remained in place. Dad's slightly more favorable view of political science hadn't translated into willingness to fund my enrollment at Stanford. The practical concerns about career prospects and educational costs continued outweighing academic considerations in his decision-making framework. March brought increasingly urgent college decision deadlines. Most of my friends had submitted enrollment deposits and were making dormitory arrangements while I remained suspended between options. The stress was affecting my academic performance as concentration became difficult amid family uncertainty and deadline pressure. My debate coach, Mr. Thompson, noticed my declining focus during tournament preparation. When I explained the college situation, his reaction was immediately supportive and ultimately influential in ways I hadn't anticipated. "You have a rare talent for legal reasoning and public advocacy," he said. "I've coached debate for 15 years, and you're among the most naturally gifted students I've encountered. It would be tragic to waste that ability on career paths that don't utilize your strengths." Mr. Thompson's assessment carried weight because Dad respected his analytical judgment, despite philosophical differences about liberal arts value. As a former corporate attorney who had transitioned to teaching, Mr. Thompson brought practical legal experience to educational discussions. His perspective might influence Dad in ways that purely academic arguments couldn't achieve. "Would you be willing to speak with my father about legal career realities?" I asked. "Not to advocate for my choices specifically, but to provide professional insight about law as a career field?" Mr. Thompson agreed enthusiastically. He'd observed my development over 4 years of debate competition and had strong opinions about my potential for legal success. His willingness to engage directly with family concerns represented invaluable support during this critical decision period. The conversation between Mr. Thompson and Dad took place in our living room on a Sunday afternoon. Unlike the Stanford meeting, this discussion occurred on familiar territory, where Dad might feel more comfortable expressing concerns and asking detailed questions about legal career practicalities. Mr. Thompson's approach was strategically brilliant. Rather than promoting law as a career choice, he discussed his own transition from engineering undergraduate studies to legal practice. His background in technical problem-solving had proven valuable in corporate law, creating a career path that combined analytical thinking with advocacy skills. Law schools actively recruit students with strong analytical backgrounds, Mr. Thompson explained. Sarah's mathematical ability and scientific reasoning would be assets in legal practice, not wasted potential as you've suggested. This reframing transformed Dad's perception of the relationship between technical skills and legal careers. Instead of viewing law as abandonment of analytical capabilities, Mr. Thompson presented it as application of those skills to different problem sets. The perspective aligned more closely with Dad's engineering mindset while validating my academic interests. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, covering law school admission processes, legal specialization areas, and career development patterns. Mr. Thompson's practical knowledge impressed Dad, who asked increasingly sophisticated questions about legal practice economics and professional advancement opportunities. Most importantly, Mr. Thompson addressed Dad's concerns about my capabilities directly. "Sarah demonstrates exceptional legal reasoning ability," he said. "Her tournament performances against college-level competition suggest she's ready for law school challenges that defeat many students. This isn't amateur interest. It's demonstrated professional aptitude." The assessment was more definitive than any previous validation of my abilities. Coming from someone whose judgment Dad trusted, it carried authority that academic counselors couldn't provide. When Mr. Thompson left that afternoon, the atmosphere felt different, despite no explicit agreements about college funding. That evening brought the most productive family discussion we'd had about my academic future. Dad's tone remained serious, but had lost the dismissive edge that characterized previous conversations. He asked thoughtful questions about my specific legal interests and how they related to debate experience. "Constitutional law fascinates me most," I explained, referencing the summer program that had been so transformative. "The intersection of legal reasoning and political theory, analyzing how court decisions shape social policy. It combines analytical thinking with real-world impact." Dad nodded thoughtfully, rather than dismissing the explanation. Mr. Thompson mentioned that constitutional lawyers often handle cases involving technical regulations and scientific evidence. That might utilize your mathematical background more. Then I realized. This represented breakthrough thinking from someone who had previously seen legal careers as a complete departure from technical education. The possibility that law might actually utilize rather than abandon my analytical capabilities opened new avenues for family compromise. However, practical concerns about educational financing remained unresolved. Dad's improved understanding of legal careers hadn't eliminated his worries about college costs and debt burdens. The merit scholarship reduced expenses significantly, but remaining costs still required substantial family contribution or student loans. "I could work additional hours during college," I suggested. "Take on tutoring, research assistance, whatever opportunities are available to reduce financial burden. College should focus on academic achievement, not financial survival," Dad replied, his protective instincts evident despite ongoing disagreement about career directions. "If we're investing in your education, it should be done properly with adequate support for success." This represented important evolution in his thinking. The conditional "if" suggested possibility rather than continued absolute refusal. Dad was beginning to consider supporting my educational choices even if he didn't entirely approve of their practical implications. The conversation ended with tentative agreement to continue exploring options rather than maintaining rigid ultimatums. Dad agreed to research law school admission requirements and legal career statistics more thoroughly. I committed to investigating combined undergraduate programs that might incorporate technical coursework alongside political science studies. Spring break provided an opportunity for more extensive college research and family discussions. We visited Stanford campus together, attending information sessions about pre-law preparation and visiting classes to observe educational quality firsthand. Dad's reactions were cautiously positive as he witnessed academic rigor that matched his expectations for intellectual challenge. The political science courses we observed impressed him with their analytical demands and research requirements. Professor lectures involved statistical analysis, theoretical framework applications, and logical reasoning that paralleled engineering problem-solving processes. The students asked sophisticated questions that demonstrated genuine intellectual engagement rather than passive information absorption. "This is more demanding than I expected," Dad admitted after sitting in on an advanced constitutional law seminar. The students are thinking at levels comparable to graduate engineering courses. This acknowledgement was crucial because it addressed his fundamental concern about academic rigor. Dad's resistance to liberal arts education stemmed partly from assumptions about intellectual demands rather than purely practical career considerations. Witnessing actual coursework quality began shifting his perspective about political science as a legitimate academic challenge. The campus visit also provided opportunities to meet with financial aid counselors about funding options and repayment strategies. Dad approached these discussions with characteristic thoroughness, analyzing different loan structures and scholarship opportunities like engineering project variables. The debt burden is manageable if career outcomes match the projections, he concluded after reviewing multiple financial scenarios. Law school placement statistics suggest reasonable return on educational investment. These practical assessments represented major progress from his previous dismissal of liberal arts education as financially irresponsible. Dad was beginning to evaluate my academic choices using the same analytical framework he applied to engineering decisions rather than rejecting them categorically. April brought final decision deadlines and the need for definitive choices about college enrollment. The campus visit and family discussions had created a more positive atmosphere, but Dad still hadn't explicitly committed to supporting my Stanford enrollment. His evolution from complete opposition to cautious consideration was encouraging, but insufficient for final college planning. The breakthrough came during another family meeting where we reviewed all college options together. Dad presented detailed analyses of different programs, comparing costs, outcomes, and academic quality with engineering precision. His research had convinced him that Stanford's political science program offered educational value commensurate with its cost. "If you're committed to political science and law school preparation," he said carefully, "Stanford provides excellent opportunities for academic achievement and professional development." The statement fell short of enthusiastic endorsement, but represented acceptance of my academic choices. Dad's practical concerns remained, but his respect for educational quality had overcome philosophical objections to liberal arts careers. The decision to support my enrollment came with conditions about maintaining academic excellence and serious career preparation. "I expect the same dedication to political science that you've shown in debate competition," he emphasized. "This isn't exploratory liberal arts sampling. It's professional preparation that should be approached with appropriate seriousness." His conditions were entirely reasonable and aligned with my own academic intentions. The merit scholarship and family support would allow me to focus on studies rather than financial survival, while pursuing intellectual interests that genuinely excited me, rather than dutiful completion of coursework I tolerated. May brought college, preparation activities that restored some normalcy to family relationships. Dad participated in orientation planning with the same detailed attention he'd previously reserved for engineering programs. His questions about course selection and academic requirements demonstrated ongoing concern about my success, even if he didn't share my enthusiasm for the subject matter. The most meaningful moment came during enrollment deposit submission. Dad insisted on writing the check himself, characterizing it as an investment in my future rather than a reluctant concession to my preferences. His signature on the paperwork felt like restoration of a partnership that had been damaged by months of conflict. "I still think engineering would have been more practical," he admitted as we sealed the enrollment envelope. "But you've demonstrated capability for academic achievement that should translate across different fields." Mr. Thompson and Professor Martinez helped me understand that law might utilize your analytical abilities more than I initially recognized. This represented as close to apology as Dad's pride would allow. He acknowledged the validity of my academic interests without admitting error in his previous opposition. The compromise preserved his dignity while validating my choices, creating a foundation for rebuilding our relationship during college preparation. Summer before freshman year was devoted to academic preparation and relationship repair. Dad researched pre-law requirements with characteristic thoroughness, creating detailed timelines for LSAT preparation and law school application processes. His involvement felt supportive rather than controlling, marking significant improvement from previous educational micromanagement. We attended several law school information sessions together, where Dad asked technical questions about admission criteria and career placement statistics. His growing comfort with legal education as serious professional preparation was evident in his sophisticated questions and respectful interactions with law school representatives. The most significant change was his attitude toward my debate achievements. Previously, he'd tolerated tournament success as a pleasant hobby that shouldn't distract from serious academic preparation. Now he began understanding debate as professional skill development directly relevant to legal career preparation. Your argumentation abilities and research skills are already at advanced levels, he observed after attending a summer tournament. Law school will build on the foundation you've established rather than starting from the basics. This recognition of my existing capabilities felt particularly validating because it acknowledged years of work that had previously seemed invisible to him. Dad was beginning to see my academic journey as coherent preparation rather than random exploration of impractical interests. August brought final preparations for college departure. Packing sessions became collaborative rather than tense as Dad helped select appropriate materials for academic success. His engineering background proved useful for organizing study spaces and selecting technology that would support research and writing requirements. The night before departure, we had our most honest conversation about the college selection process and its impact on our relationship. Dad expressed regret about his initial reaction to my academic interests while maintaining that his concerns had been motivated by love rather than desire to control my future. I wanted to protect you from making choices that might limit opportunities, he explained. My experience as an immigrant shaped how I think about career security in ways that didn't account for your different talents and interests. This acknowledgement of cultural and generational differences in our perspectives was crucial for ongoing relationship repair. Dad's protective instincts had been real, even when their expression felt controlling and dismissive. Understanding his motivations helped me appreciate his concerns while maintaining boundaries about my own decision-making authority. You raised me to think analytically and pursue excellence, I replied. Applying those principles to political science rather than engineering doesn't reject your values, it extends them to different areas. The conversation ended with mutual understanding, if not complete agreement about career directions. Dad's support for my education was now genuine rather than reluctant, creating the foundation for continued relationship development during college years. Move-in day at Stanford was emotional for multiple reasons. The campus represented achievement of academic goals that had seemed impossible during winter conflicts with Dad. But it also marked a transition to independence that would test whether our relationship repairs were sustainable beyond family, home dynamics. Dad's behavior during dormitory setup revealed the depth of his attitude changes. He interacted respectfully with my roommate's family, who expressed enthusiasm about liberal arts education that he would have found incomprehensible months earlier. His conversations with other parents demonstrated growing comfort with his daughters' non-technical academic pursuits. The final goodbye was tender rather than tense for the first time in months. Dad hugged me with genuine warmth while expressing confidence in my academic potential rather than worry about my career choices. Study hard and make us proud, he said, using the same phrase that had accompanied me to elementary school events. You have the ability to achieve whatever you set your mind to accomplish. The familiar words carried different meaning now because they acknowledged my actual interests, rather than trying to redirect them toward his preferences. Dad's faith in my capabilities was finally aligned with support for my choices, creating a foundation for academic success that hadn't existed during months of family conflict. As my parents drove away from Stanford campus, I stood in front of my dormitory feeling simultaneously independent and supported. The journey from Dad's dismissive "college is wasted on you" to genuine encouragement had been difficult for our entire family. But the process had ultimately strengthened relationships by forcing honest conversations about expectations, values, and respect for individual autonomy. The challenges ahead were primarily academic rather than familial. Proving Dad's concerns wrong about liberal arts education would require exceptional performance in demanding coursework. Demonstrating that political science could lead to meaningful career opportunities would take years of focused preparation and professional development. However, the foundation was now solid. Dad's support was genuine rather than conditional, providing emotional security that would facilitate academic risk-taking and intellectual exploration. The validation of my capabilities and interests created confidence to pursue ambitious goals, without constant family conflict undermining concentration and motivation. Standing on the threshold of college independence, I realized that our family crisis had ultimately provided valuable preparation for adult challenges. Learning to advocate for my authentic interests despite significant opposition had developed resilience and self-knowledge that would prove essential for law school and legal career success. The conversation that had begun with Dad's devastating dismissal of my academic potential was transforming into ongoing dialogue about achievement, career development, and family support. The outcome was a more mature relationship, based on mutual respect, rather than parental control and childhood deference. Most importantly, I now had the opportunity to prove through performance, rather than argument, that his initial judgment, "college is wasted on you," was fundamentally wrong. The test would be academic achievement, at levels that commanded respect even from someone whose definition of intellectual success had been previously narrow and technically focused. The stage was set for demonstrating that intelligence could be expressed through political science with the same rigor and practical value that Dad associated with engineering careers. Success would require not just meeting his expectations, but exceeding them in ways that challenged his assumptions about liberal arts education and career potential. The real work was just beginning. Stanford's autumn air carried the weight of new beginnings as I walked across campus toward my first political science lecture. The months of family conflict seemed distant now, replaced by the immediate challenges of college-level academic work. Professor Williams' constitutional law course occupied the premier slot in my schedule, the subject that had sparked this entire journey toward legal education. The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as 200 students filed into tiered seating. Unlike high school classrooms where familiar faces provided comfort, this environment was entirely foreign. Students from different backgrounds, academic experiences, and intellectual traditions created diversity I'd never encountered in California's suburban high schools. Professor Williams commanded attention from the moment she entered. Her reputation for rigorous analysis and demanding standards had preceded her, but seeing her in person revealed someone whose passion for constitutional interpretation was immediately infectious. She began without preamble, launching into discussion of Marbury versus Madison, as though continuing conversation from the previous day. Constitutional interpretation requires analytical precision that surpasses most academic disciplines, she announced, scanning the lecture hall with deliberate intensity. Legal reasoning demands synthesis of historical analysis, logical argumentation, and contemporary application that challenges even exceptional students. The statement felt like a direct response to Dad's concerns about liberal arts rigor. Here was a professor whose intellectual demands matched anything he'd described about advanced engineering coursework. The complexity of legal reasoning she outlined required exactly the analytical capabilities that had driven my academic success throughout high school. My first assignment reinforced this impression. The case brief required analyzing competing constitutional interpretations across historical periods, evaluating judicial reasoning strategies, and developing original arguments about contemporary applications. The work was more intellectually demanding than any high school assignment, including advanced placement projects that had challenged me significantly. Late nights in the library became routine as I immersed myself in legal scholarship and constitutional history. The research process required skills I'd developed through debate preparation, but applied them to unprecedented depth of analysis. Primary sources, secondary commentaries, and theoretical frameworks had to be integrated into coherent arguments that met Professor Williams' exacting standards. The first graded assignment returned with comments that exceeded my expectations. Professor Williams had noted the sophistication of my legal reasoning and the thoroughness of my research methodology. Her written feedback suggested I'd demonstrated analytical capabilities that positioned me well for continued success in political science coursework. Your constitutional interpretation shows mature understanding of judicial reasoning, she'd written in precise handwriting. The analysis suggests strong potential for advanced legal studies. This early validation provided confidence that Dad's concerns about my academic preparation had been unfounded. Political science wasn't requiring abandonment of analytical thinking. It was channeling those capabilities toward different problem sets that engaged me more deeply than engineering subjects ever had. Other courses reinforced this pattern. Statistics. For political research involved mathematical analysis more complex than anything required in high school calculus. Comparative government demanded logical reasoning about institutional structures and policy outcomes. International relations required synthesis of economic theory, historical analysis, and strategic thinking that challenged multiple intellectual capabilities simultaneously. The academic workload was substantial, often requiring 12-hour study days to complete assignments adequately. However, the intellectual engagement made sustained effort feel purposeful rather than burdensome. Unlike high school engineering courses where motivation required conscious discipline, political science work generated genuine curiosity that made intensive study feel like exploration rather than obligation. My first semester grades reflected this enhanced engagement. The 4.0 GPA I'd maintained throughout high school continued at Stanford, but now represented achievement in subjects that aligned with my authentic interests rather than dutiful completion of required coursework. When final grades arrived, I felt pride that was qualitatively different from previous academic success. The semester break provided an opportunity to share these achievements with family. Dad's reaction to my transcript revealed how much his attitude had evolved since the previous spring. Instead of polite acknowledgement of grades that didn't really matter to him, he examined my coursework with genuine interest and respect. Constitutional law looks challenging, he observed, reviewing course descriptions and grade reports. The analytical requirements seem comparable to advanced engineering theory. This comparison represented breakthrough thinking from someone who had previously dismissed liberal arts as intellectually inferior to technical subjects. Dad was beginning to recognize that academic rigor could be expressed through different disciplines rather than exclusively through mathematics and science. More significantly, he asked substantive questions about course content rather than limiting discussion to practical career considerations. His curiosity about constitutional interpretation and political theory suggested genuine intellectual interest rather than dutiful parental attention to my academic activities. The Supreme Court case analysis you described requires complex logical reasoning, he said after I explained research methodology for Professor Williams's class. Legal precedent evaluation seems analogous to engineering design optimization. Different variables, but similar analytical processes. These observations showed Dad's engineering perspective was becoming a bridge for understanding, rather than a barrier to appreciating my academic work. Instead of seeing political science as a complete departure from analytical thinking, he was recognizing intellectual connections that validated my career direction without requiring him to abandon his own professional identity. Spring semester brought more advanced coursework and increased specialization toward constitutional law concentration. Professor Martinez's seminar on civil rights and constitutional development proved particularly transformative, combining historical analysis with contemporary legal challenges in ways that demonstrated political science's practical relevance. The seminar required sustained research projects that approximated graduate-level scholarship. My topic focused on First Amendment interpretation in digital age contexts, examining how historical precedents applied to contemporary free speech challenges. The research process involved primary legal sources, empirical data analysis, and theoretical framework application that challenged me more than any previous academic work. Working with Professor Martinez revealed dimensions of legal scholarship I hadn't encountered in undergraduate coursework. Her guidance helped me develop research methodologies that would prove essential for law school preparation, while creating intellectual foundation for understanding constitutional law's evolving nature. Your analytical approach shows promise for significant legal scholarship, she said during office hours discussion about my research progress. The combination of historical analysis and contemporary application demonstrates sophisticated legal reasoning. This assessment was particularly meaningful because it came from a professor whose own scholarship had influenced Supreme Court decisions. Her evaluation suggested my academic capabilities might extend beyond undergraduate achievement toward original research that could contribute to legal knowledge. The research project culminated in a presentation to Stanford's undergraduate political science conference, where students presented original scholarship to faculty and graduate student audiences. The opportunity to share my constitutional law research with academic experts provided a crucial testing ground for ideas and methodologies I'd developed. The presentation went better than I'd anticipated. Faculty questions revealed genuine interest in my research findings rather than polite attention to student work. Several professors suggested the project had potential for publication in undergraduate journals, recognition that felt like validation of academic capabilities Dad had questioned just months earlier. Most importantly, the conference experience demonstrated that political science research could generate new knowledge rather than simply summarizing existing scholarship. My constitutional law analysis had identified previously unexamined connections between historical precedents and contemporary legal challenges, contributing original insights to academic discussions. When I called home to share news about the conference presentation and publication possibilities, Dad's reaction surprised me with its genuine enthusiasm. His questions about research methodology and findings revealed respect for my academic work that would have been impossible during our college selection conflicts. Original research that contributes to legal scholarship sounds like significant academic achievement, he said. Publication in academic journals requires analytical rigor that matches any field's intellectual standards. This acknowledgement represented a complete transformation from his previous dismissal of liberal arts as academically inferior to engineering. Dad was beginning to understand that intellectual achievement could be expressed through different disciplines while maintaining comparable analytical demands and practical significance. Summer between freshman and sophomore years brought the opportunity for a legal internship that would test classroom learning against professional reality. The American Civil Liberties Union offered research positions for undergraduate students interested in constitutional law careers, providing exposure to actual legal work rather than purely theoretical study. The internship application process was competitive, requiring academic transcripts, writing samples, and interviews with staff attorneys. When acceptance came, it felt like recognition that my academic preparation was translating into professional readiness, even as an undergraduate student. The ACLU internship proved more intellectually challenging than anticipated. Real legal cases involved complexity that exceeded classroom examples, requiring research skills and analytical thinking that pushed beyond undergraduate coursework expectations. Working with staff attorneys revealed the practical applications of constitutional theory I'd been studying academically. My assigned research involved First Amendment cases pending before federal courts, examining precedents and developing arguments for legal briefs. The work required precision and thoroughness that matched anything Dad had described about engineering project management, while engaging intellectual interests that engineering coursework had never generated. The attorneys I worked with treated my contributions seriously rather than as student busywork. When my research identified relevant precedents that strengthened legal arguments, senior staff incorporated those findings into actual court filings. The experience of contributing to real legal advocacy validated academic preparation in ways that classroom success alone couldn't achieve. Most significantly, the internship provided exposure to constitutional law's social impact that confirmed my career direction. Working on cases involving free speech, religious liberty, and due process rights demonstrated how legal reasoning could address contemporary social challenges through principled application of constitutional principles. When the internship concluded, my supervisor's evaluation exceeded my expectations. She noted the quality of my research work and my potential for legal career success, providing professional validation that complemented academic achievements. Her letter of recommendation would prove valuable for law school applications and future internship opportunities. Returning to Stanford for sophomore year, I carried confidence from summer legal experience that enhanced classroom learning. Constitutional law coursework now connected to practical applications I'd witnessed firsthand, making theoretical discussions more engaging and personally meaningful. Advanced political science courses built on foundations established during freshman year while introducing greater specialization toward pre-law preparation. Professor Chen's course on legal research and analysis provided methodological training that would prove essential for law school success, while challenging analytical capabilities in new ways. The course required substantial research projects that approximated law school case preparation, examining legal precedents and developing original arguments about constitutional interpretation. Professor Chen's standards matched those of actual law school professors, providing realistic preparation for challenges I would face in legal education. My research project that semester focused on Equal Protection Clause interpretation in educational contexts, examining how Supreme Court decisions had shaped contemporary school policy. The work required integration of constitutional law, educational policy analysis, and empirical research about implementation outcomes. The project demonstrated how political science education was preparing me for law school challenges while contributing to practical policy discussions. When Professor Chen selected my paper for inclusion in Stanford's undergraduate research journal, it felt like recognition that my academic work was reaching professional standards rather than remaining purely educational exercise. The publication provided tangible evidence of academic achievement that transcended grade point averages or course completion. Original scholarship that met journal standards represented an intellectual contribution that validated my career direction even to skeptics who questioned liberal arts education's practical value. When I shared publication news with Dad, his reaction revealed a complete transformation from his previous dismissive attitude toward my academic interests. His pride in the achievement was evident and unqualified, matching enthusiasm he'd shown for any academic recognition I'd received. Published research as an undergraduate student represents significant intellectual achievement, he said. Original scholarship that contributes to legal knowledge demonstrates analytical capabilities that exceed most professional standards. This statement represented full acceptance of my academic choices and recognition of their intellectual legitimacy. Dad was now celebrating achievements in political science with the same enthusiasm he would have shown for engineering accomplishments, marking complete evolution from his previous skepticism. Junior year brought intensified preparation for law school applications and LSAT examination. The standardized test would provide an objective measure of legal reasoning abilities that could validate or challenge confidence I'd developed through undergraduate coursework and internship experience. LSAT preparation required different analytical skills than political science coursework emphasized, focusing on logical reasoning patterns and reading comprehension under time pressure. The test format challenged capabilities I'd developed through debate training while requiring precision that exceeded tournament competition demands. Months of intensive preparation culminated in test day performance that exceeded my expectations. The score placed me in 99th percentile nationwide, demonstrating legal reasoning abilities that positioned me competitively for admission to top law schools including Harvard, Yale, and Stanford programs. When LSAT results arrived, Dad's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. The objective measure of my legal reasoning capabilities provided validation that transcended any remaining doubts about my academic preparation or career potential. 99th percentile performance demonstrates exceptional analytical ability, he said, examining score reports with engineering precision. These results suggest law school preparation that exceeds most students' capabilities. The LSAT success provided a foundation for law school applications that would test whether undergraduate achievements translated into admission to premier legal education programs. Harvard Law School represented the ultimate validation of academic preparation, admission standards that recognized only exceptional candidates. My law school applications emphasized undergraduate research experience, internship achievements, and academic performance while demonstrating commitment to constitutional law practice. Personal statements connected academic interests to career goals while explaining intellectual development that had led to legal education choice. The application process required letters of recommendation from professors who could assess my academic potential and professional readiness. Professor Martinez and Professor Chen provided enthusiastic endorsements that highlighted research capabilities and analytical achievements that positioned me favorably for admission consideration. When acceptance letters began arriving in March, the results exceeded my expectations. Harvard, Yale, and Stanford all offered admission with competitive financial aid packages that recognized academic merit while making legal education financially accessible. The moment I'd been working toward since high school conflict with Dad had finally arrived. Law school admission to premier programs represented validation of every choice I'd made, despite his initial opposition and skepticism about liberal arts education's practical value. Calling home with admission news felt like the completion of a journey that had begun with Dad's devastating dismissal of my academic potential. His reaction to law school acceptances demonstrated a complete transformation from skepticism to genuine pride and excitement about my educational achievements. Harvard Law School admission represents extraordinary academic achievement, he said, emotion evident in his voice. This outcome validates everything you've worked toward and proves your analytical capabilities exceed any concerns I expressed. This statement felt like a formal apology for his previous doubts, while acknowledging that my academic choices had proven wiser than his initial assessment. Dad was explicitly admitting that his judgment about liberal arts education had been wrong, while celebrating achievements that exceeded his expectations. The conversation continued with detailed discussion about law school program comparisons and career opportunities that legal education would provide. Dad's engagement was genuine and enthusiastic, rather than dutiful parental attention, marking complete evolution from his previous dismissive attitude toward my academic interests. Senior year at Stanford provided an opportunity to complete undergraduate education while preparing for law school challenges ahead. Advanced constitutional law courses and independent research projects created a foundation for legal education, while allowing continued academic achievement in subjects that genuinely excited me. My senior thesis examined Supreme Court decision-making, patterns in First Amendment cases, analyzing how judicial reasoning had evolved across different historical periods. The research required sophisticated statistical analysis combined with legal scholarship that challenged me more than any previous academic work. Professor Martinez supervised the thesis research, providing guidance that elevated the project toward graduate-level scholarship standards. Her mentorship helped me develop analytical frameworks that would prove valuable for law school success, while contributing original insights to constitutional law literature. The completed thesis earned highest departmental honors and recommendation, for additional publication in political science journals focused on constitutional law scholarship. These achievements represented the culmination of undergraduate education while demonstrating readiness for advanced legal studies. Graduation day arrived with significance that extended beyond typical college completion ceremonies. The event represented vindication of academic choices that had created severe family conflict while demonstrating intellectual achievements that exceeded anyone's initial expectations. Dad attended commencement with obvious pride and excitement about my educational accomplishments. His presence felt like a celebration of a shared journey, rather than an obligation to acknowledge achievements he didn't value. The transformation in his attitude was complete and genuine. When my name was announced as graduating summa cum laude with departmental distinction, Dad's applause was enthusiastic and unrestrained. His pride in my achievements was evident to everyone around us, marking complete contrast from his previous skepticism about liberal arts education. The most meaningful moment came during post-graduation conversation when Dad explicitly acknowledged how wrong his initial assessment had been about my academic potential and career direction. "You proved that college was not wasted on you," he said, referencing his devastating comment from senior year of high school. "Your achievements exceeded anything I imagined possible and demonstrated analytical capabilities that surpass most professional standards." This acknowledgement felt like formal vindication of every difficult choice I'd made despite his opposition. Dad was explicitly admitting that his previous judgment had been wrong while celebrating intellectual achievements that validated my academic direction. But the most important recognition came when he continued speaking about what my success meant for his understanding of education and career development. "You taught me that intelligence can be expressed through different paths than I previously understood," he said. "Political science and legal preparation require analytical rigor that matches any field while engaging capabilities that engineering education might not have developed." This represented complete transformation in his thinking about academic disciplines and career possibilities. Instead of viewing engineering as a superior intellectual challenge, Dad now recognized that different fields could provide comparable analytical demands while utilizing different intellectual strengths. The conversation concluded with his expression of confidence about my law school preparation and future legal career success. "Harvard Law School will challenge you appropriately while building on the foundation you've established through political science education," he said. "Your constitutional law expertise and research experience position you exceptionally well for legal studies." Standing there in graduation regalia, surrounded by a family whose support had been restored through demonstration of academic achievement, I reflected on the journey from Dad's initial dismissal to this moment of complete validation. The phrase, "college is wasted on you," had motivated 4 years of intensive academic work designed to prove its inaccuracy. Every grade, every research project, every academic recognition had been steps toward demonstrating that his initial judgment was wrong, and that my intellectual capabilities could achieve success through political science preparation. The proof was now complete and undeniable. Summa cum laude graduation, departmental honors, published research, law school admission to premier programs. These achievements represented validation that transcended any remaining doubts about my academic choices or capabilities. More importantly, the process had transformed our family relationship from conflict based on different educational philosophies to partnership based on mutual respect for analytical achievement regardless of disciplinary focus. Dad's evolution from skeptic to enthusiastic supporter marked growth that benefited both of us. As we left Stanford campus for the final time, I realized that proving Dad wrong had required more than just academic success. The journey had demanded development of intellectual confidence that could withstand criticism from people whose opinions mattered most, while maintaining focus on authentic interests rather than external expectations. The real achievement wasn't just undergraduate success or law school admission. It was a demonstration that intelligence and analytical capability could be expressed through different paths than conventional expectations suggested. Dad's recognition of this truth represented victory that extended beyond personal vindication toward broader understanding about educational diversity and career possibility. Law school would bring new challenges that would test preparation I'd developed through political science education. However, the foundation was solid, and the confidence genuine. 4 years of proving Dad's initial assessment wrong had created resilience and intellectual capability that would serve me well in legal education and professional practice. The story, that began with a devastating dismissal of my academic potential, had concluded with complete validation of choices that seemed impossible during high school conflict. College had not been wasted on me. It had been the foundation for achievements that exceeded everyone's expectations, while opening doorways to legal careers that would utilize analytical capabilities Dad had initially wanted channeled toward engineering. Standing on the threshold of law school admission with undergraduate achievements that commanded respect even from previous skeptics, I understood that the most important lesson wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about maintaining confidence in authentic interests and capabilities despite opposition from people whose approval had previously defined my self-worth. Validation felt complete, but the real work was just beginning. Law school would test whether undergraduate preparation translated into professional capability while providing opportunities to contribute to legal scholarship and constitutional interpretation that had fascinated me since high school debate. Competition. Dad's final words as we drove away from Stanford campus captured the transformation that had occurred not just in his attitude, but in our relationship dynamics. "I'm proud of who you've become and excited to see what you'll achieve in law school," he said. "Your success proved that parents' expectations should support children's authentic capabilities rather than limiting them to familiar territory." This wisdom represented growth that benefited both of us while creating the foundation for continued relationship development as I moved toward independent professional achievement. The conflict that had seemed so destructive during high school had ultimately strengthened our bond while teaching valuable lessons about persistence, authentic choice, and intellectual courage. The next chapter would begin at Harvard Law School, where political science preparation would be tested against legal education's most demanding standards. However, the confidence and analytical capability developed through proving Dad wrong about liberal arts education provided the foundation for continued success in pursuits that genuinely excited rather than merely challenged me. College had not been wasted. It had been preparation for achievements that validated every difficult choice made, despite family opposition and personal doubt. The journey from dismissal to validation was complete, but the path toward legal career contribution was just beginning. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.